You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
And did he provide information to assist you further in your investigation regarding location data linked to Alex Cox or a device associated with him?
Yes, there was one particular device that Alex Cox seemed to use extensively, and Nick Balance was reviewing records for that device, transactional records, and location information, and providing me with and other investigators with information that we could follow up with from those records.
And in relation to that information, were there specific time frames that you were interested in or looked at?
Yes. So this particular device had extensive location information within it. In the initial stages of the investigation, when we learned that JJ was missing and shortly thereafter that Tylee was also missing from Idaho, we didn't know really where they had gone missing exactly and when they had gone missing. Initially, it was as much as potentially 3 months they had been missing from sometime around August until the investigation was starting here in late November. And so over the course of that, the next ensuing months, we were able to narrow that time frame down significantly to help us determine where they had been or where they had last been seen and when they had gone missing. And that was critical for us to determine what had happened to them, just because it was hard to know where and when in time to look at the various types of information that would be available to identify what had happened to them. And so by approximately April of 2020, we had narrowed down that they had both been went missing in September of 2019. Tylee appears to have gone missing first, sometime around the 8th or the 9th of September was our best information, and that JJ had gone missing approximately 2 weeks later, around September 22nd or September 23rd. So I requested, at that stage in the investigation, we had not been able to locate the children, and Nick Balance had been providing location information.
Judge, at this point, it's becoming a significant narrative. Can the state ask some questions?
Well, there's an objection there on narrative. I'll sustain that. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
So in determining the last known sighting of Tylee being around September 8th or 9th, and the last known of JJ around September 22nd or 23rd, what time period did you initially focus in on in relation to location data?
So I requested that Nick Balance look at those time frames in September related to the children, and he was doing that and providing us with information. And due to the size and the amount of this information, I asked for him to provide me with the same information that he was reviewing, and put it in a format that I could review, that I could start that process of also looking at that data and see if there were potential avenues for investigation. So he provided me with a file of all of the location information for that particular device for really all of September of 2019, from September 1st through September 30th.
At some point, did you also end up requesting location data for the month of October?
I did.
And why did you request location data for the month of October?
So there were incidents that happened in October, not necessarily related to the children, but related to other components of this joint investigation. And at a later date, it was actually after the children had been recovered. I requested him, Nick Balance, provide me the records for all of October, and I did a similar review as I did for the September data, and I completed that in September of 2020.
And when you were reviewing this data from September and October, were you also following up on information that you gained from that location data?
Yes, it was really a process. As I said, Nick Balance initially was giving us information that he was observing in those records, and we were following up as investigators. Sometimes I did that personally. Sometimes other investigators did that, particularly in the Rexburg Police Department. They were doing that. And then as I started looking at those records myself, I tried to, as best as I could, determine whether there's potential follow-up investigation can be at these sites where the device had gone. And some of that I did myself. Sometimes other investigators were tasked to go and follow up with what we observed.
And in going through that location data and then looking through the follow-up that was done, did you assist in preparing a summary exhibit today?
Yes, I did.
And is that, actually, I will do this. Your Honor, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 299. It's actually a PowerPoint on a thumb drive would be the original exhibit. I have a copy of that for counsel and the court. And then I also have printed out copies, a courtesy copy for Your Honor, one for the court and one for counsel.
And can you explain a little more about what the summary exhibit is?
Yes, Your Honor. And I was going to see if I could have the witness shown a copy.
Very well.
And Investigator Wright, I just asked them to hand you Exhibit 299. In reviewing the location data, is that some of the information included within this exhibit?
Yes, it is.
Does this exhibit also contain some of the follow-up investigation that was completed as well?
Yes, it does.
Would this, in looking through it, does this appear to be an accurate depiction of the exhibit created?
Yes, it does.
And would this aid you in your testimony today?
Yes.
And would this do you believe this would aid the jurors in understanding the evidence in your testimony?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of State's Exhibit 299.
Any objection?
Judge, the information as it came from the Homer J. Maximus account is admitted by way of stipulation. Just so we have a clear record, the other information that was not obtained from Homer J. Maximus and part of this officer's investigation, I won't object at this time to that admission of those.
All right. So under Rule of Evidence 1006, then this may be admitted as a summary to prove content.
And Your Honor, I'm just looking at the time and wondering if before I start publication, it may be a good time for the morning break.
I think that's a good idea, Ms. Blake. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take a morning recess. It is just before 10 o'clock, so let's try and come back on at 10:20.
All rise, please. Session.
Thank you. Please be seated. Let's have the jurors brought back, please.
All rise, please. Present and accounted for.
All right. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. If you'd like to continue with your direct, Ms. Blake, we did just admit State's Exhibit 299, and you can continue with direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I am going to be asking to have 299 on the jump drive to publish.
Very well. We'll have the bailiff deliver that to you, and if you'd like to publish, you may.
Okay, if I may publish.
Yes, you may.
Investigator Wright, in looking at this first slide, it appears there's a name, a phone number, and an email address. Could you indicate what those are for the record?
Yes, Alex Cox, and the phone number is 480-351-9120. And the email address is homerjmaximus@gmail.com.
And you talked before about a particular device. Is this some of the information associated with that device?
Yes, it is.
And is that the device that Agent Balance provided you data points for?
Yes.
When you look at data points, do you know where that information is being retrieved from or how it's retrieved?
Yes, these location data points that Nick Balance provided to me came from two sources, from the cellular provider. In this case, it was Verizon for that particular phone, and from Google, who retained location information associated with the Gmail account associated with that device.
And do you know what type of data points these are?
Yes, they primarily comprise three types of data points. There was GPS, global positioning satellite data. There was also Wi-Fi data, and there was also the cell tower data. The GPS data tends to be the most precise. It has a margin of error of usually a few meters to perhaps several meters. The Wi-Fi data, as I understand it, is a little less precise, but still fairly precise. Usually, in my experience from my review, the margin of error on it was 15 meters to 100 or 200 meters. And then the cell tower data was the least precise. The margin of error on it could be hundreds of meters or even thousands of meters, depending on the density of the towers.
And when we talk about the margin of error, is the smaller the radius, the more precise?
Yes, the location data is really an estimate by the source of the information, Google and Verizon, of where that device is based on the technical information. And so when it gives us a margin of error, the smaller the number is, the more precise it is. They're telling us that they believe they don't know exactly where the device is, but they have drawn a radius and they believe that is the likely area that it is within.
And when you're looking at these data points, is it fair to say that you try to focus in on the ones that are more precise?
Yes.
And as we go through this presentation, did you denote the time in military time?
It was provided to us in that format. So it was also in the file that I reviewed, also in that format. So I retained that to avoid any confusion.
And as we go through this, did you learn how Alex Cox was related or played into the investigation?
Yes, I did.
And how did he play in?
He was the brother of Lori Vallow. She was the mother of the missing children. And when she moved to Idaho, he moved with her.
And did you learn of any connection between Chad Daybell and Alex Cox?
Yes, I did. I learned that they were associated with each other. They knew each other, and Lori Vallow had married Chad Daybell shortly before the investigation had been initiated. And so he was connected to Chad Daybell through his sister, Lori Vallow.
As you started looking at this data location, were you able to determine when the device associated with Alex Cox first arrived in Idaho?
Yes, I did.
And when was that?
The device arrived in Rexburg, Idaho, where it started residing in that area for the first time on September 1st of 2019. As of the morning of September 1st, the device was actually in St. George, Utah, where it had stayed at a hotel. And then it moved at driving speed towards Rexburg, Idaho, where it arrived on the evening of September 1st.
And do you know where that device arrived?
Yes, it went to an apartment complex called the Rock Creek Townhomes, located at 565 Pioneer Road.
Do you know which apartment that device originally was located at?
Yes, I do. It went to Unit 175 within that complex.
At some point, did that device appear to be spending time at a different unit?
It did.
And which unit was that?
Unit 107.
And do you recall approximately when the device started being associated with Unit 107?
Yes, on September 5th. It arrived in 107 for the first time. There was some data showing it going back and forth between 175 and 107 on September 5th, and beginning on the evening of September 5th, it began to spend its nights, primarily the nights that I reviewed, in 107.
Through the investigation, did you learn who apartment 107 was associated with?
Alex Cox was primarily using that address.
And did you learn who was using the apartment 175?
Yes, Lori Vallow and the children were primarily living there.
And we talked about the fact that you focused on specific dates within September. Do you recall one of the first dates that you focused on?
Yes, September 8th, 2019 became an important date in the investigation.
And I believe there should be a laser pointer up there if it will assist you at any point. When we're looking at this slide, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
Yes, we're seeing a series of times for the date of September 8th, 2019, and then locations associated with those times. And so in the course of my review, I began to go through this data from September, for the month of September, really data point to data point. It helped the most to look at each data point individually and in order to be able to draw some conclusions about the data. And also each data point had underlying data associated with how precise the information was. And so it helped to look at it to know how much that information could be relied on. And so as I had done that, I'd gotten to this date of September 8th, and I progressed through that date. And then I prepared a report, really a summary report of where the device appeared to be at certain times. I didn't put in every data point that I observed or necessarily the data points in transit between points, but just this is where it was at a certain point. And then if I could determine where it went after that, where it was next.
So on this particular slide, we're seeing some of the data points that you plotted in your report.
Yes.
Or I should say included, not plotted.
Yes.
That's correct.
Correct.
Was there a specific reason that September 8th was a focal point for you?
Yes. We had, in other parts of the investigation, we had conducted a search on an iCloud account that was associated with Lori Vallow, the Lori for Style iCloud account, and had been able to retrieve some photographs from that account. And the photographs appeared to show Tylee Ryan, JJ Vallow, and Alexandra Cox in the vicinity of Old Faithful Geyser within Yellowstone National Park, and that those photos, or at least one in particular, was timestamped of 1549 on September 8th, 2019.
And when we start looking at this slide, this is the location data associated with a device linked to Alex Cox.
Yes, correct.
And so can you talk us through the travel of that device?
So on this particular date, it had been at 565 Pioneer Road earlier in the morning, and I didn't reflect that here. But the last stop that it made within Rexburg was at the Maverick at 859 West Main Street in Rexburg. It was there for a period of time, and I reflected the time it departed that, which was at 11:52. So that was the last time it was in Rexburg that morning. The device then begins to travel to the west entrance of Yellowstone National Park and gets there at 13:29.
And if I pause there with you just briefly, did you learn anything in relation to when that vehicle entered the park?
Yes, I did.
What did you learn?
We had obtained assistance from the National Park Service, and they were able to provide a variety of assistance to us. But one thing was they had looked at cameras entering the park on that particular date and were able to identify a vehicle that Alex Cox was driving, and Tylee Ryan was seen in that vehicle.
And if you would continue?
Yes. And so that vehicle gets to the west entrance of Yellowstone National Park. The camera footage is taken from the perspective of the booth where you pay to enter the park. And so it showed Alex Cox driving a F-150 pickup truck, and in the front passenger seat is Tylee Ryan. The rear windows are tinted, but it's clear there's other people in the back seat as well. So that was the main footage that we were able to get from the National Park Service on that particular date.
And so then after entering the park, where did the device go?
It traveled along the main loop road there within the national park to the area of Old Faithful. The data, it arrives in that area between 1450 and 1457. Some of the data is imprecise in that area. but we start getting more specific data at 1504. And from 1504 to 1522, it seems to be in the vicinity of the Old Faithful Lodge cafeteria, which is near the geyser itself. And then we get some more data from 1542 to 1604 that puts that device at the rim of Old Faithful or the boardwalk there where people can observe the geyser. And then at 1615 to 1627, we get some data points that seem to put the device in the Old Faithful parking lot area. And then the device leaves the Old Faithful area and travels westbound on US 287. I think it's also called maybe US 191 as well. It travels eastbound towards Yellowstone Lake and then turns south towards Lewis Lake. It passes Lewis Lake on that main road, which is a paved road. And at 1712, it appears to turn around, reverses course, drives back past Lewis Lake, past Yellowstone Lake, past Old Faithful, and then out of the west entrance of the national park at 1840. It then makes a stop in West Yellowstone, Montana itself in a commercial area at 1845 and leaves that area in 1902.
And again, in relation to this device, when the device is shown to be at the entrance of the national park, there's also a video placing a pickup truck with Alex Cox and Tylee Ryan in the vehicle.
When it enters the park, yes. When it exits the park, there was some camera footage, but I believe it just captured the back license plate. It didn't capture who was in the vehicle at that point. Thank you.
And if we go to this next slide, can you tell us what we're seeing on this slide?
So that this is an image taken from the same mapping software that I was reviewing that had been provided to me by Nick Balance with the data points mapped in it. And this is an overhead view of the Old Faithful geyser and the lodge area around Old Faithful.
And these are some of the data points we just talked about on the previous slide. Is that correct?
Yes, it also can. These red data points are the data points that I just talked about that show the device in the area of some of those locations. So I can point at those if you'd like.
If you would, please do so.
So the upper left here is the geyser itself, Old Faithful. This is a boardwalk area where spectators can see the geyser. This is the Old Faithful Lodge cafeteria. The Old Faithful parking lot is not in this photo, but it's located roughly southeast of this location. So we had a series of data points. First at the cafeteria area from 1504 to 1522. And then we had a series of GPS data points fairly precise from 1542 to 1604 clumped together here on the boardwalk. And then after that, we didn't get some data points until 1615 when they were in the Old Faithful Lodge parking lot and seemed to leave that area about 1627.
And do you know what type of data points these are?
I believe it's a mixture of Wi-Fi and GPS. When I say Wi-Fi, my understanding is it doesn't necessarily mean that they have joined a Wi-Fi network, but as a person moves around, a device can reach out and shake hands with Wi-Fi networks that it comes in contact with, and Google keeps that information and it uses it to help determine approximately where a device is. And so some of this was a mixture of that. There were also cellular data points, which a lot of times are off the map. They're where the nearest cell tower is usually. But these ones along the boardwalk were GPS data points.
And when we talk about that boardwalk area, is there a reason, did you focus in on that particular area?
Yes, I did.
And why was that?
The photograph taken of Tylee, JJ, and Alex, one in particular, seemed to be at or near that boardwalk in around Old Faithful, or at least a view of the geyser basin near Old Faithful.
And is this the photo you're referencing?
Yes, I am. That's the one that came from the Lori Force style iCloud account and had a timestamp of 1549 on September 8th, 2019.
And do you recognize the individuals in that photo?
Yes, I do.
And who are they?
On the left is JJ Vallow, and in the middle is Tylee Ryan, and on the right is Alex Cox.
And was this the last known photo of Tylee Ryan?
There were a few photos taken in that same series, but in that same location, I believe, and there were no photos of Tylee Ryan. And at this point in the investigation, that was the last time we knew her to be alive.
And can you talk about what we're seeing in this particular slide?
Yes. So this is again an image of from the mapping software, and there's a lot of data going on this, but I'll walk you through it. So in this upper left corner here is the Old Faithful Lodge area. And this is showing what those data points look at that I was reviewing. And they show the movement of the data points as at 1627 approximately, the device leaves this area, travels along 287 past this point, which is the west thumb of Yellowstone Lake, which is this area. It then the highway then turns south. It continues on that highway past this, which is Lewis Lake. And if it would have continued on this road, it would get into Grand Teton National Park. In this area, we were getting both frequent and precise data points. Some of them were coming in multiple times a minute, which was helpful in determining that the vehicle appeared to have quickly turned around and immediately reversed course. For example, it was 1709 there, but we had multiple at 1712, and it was already back at 1713 there. The reason I was looking hard at this particular information is, first, it was the last known location for Tylee Ryan to be alive. And we were concerned that something potentially had happened to her in Yellowstone National Park. And we were in communication with National Park Service and preparing to conduct searches in Yellowstone National Park if necessary to see if we could locate her. And part of my review here was to help identify potential sites to conduct a search.
And what did you determine in relation to potential sites for a search?
Yes, I determined that it moved from Old Faithful down to this point at what appeared to be driving speed. It turned around fairly quickly within a minute or two. It didn't appear to have deviated off the main road. It didn't appear to have stopped for any substantial period of time. And then it reversed course. It reversed course back the way it came, back past Old Faithful without stopping, and then continued westbound and then northbound until it left the park. There are gaps in data points, for example, here and so forth, where for a few minutes at a time, we did not get any data. But based on what drive time between those data points was consistent with the vehicle or the device continuing to move at driving speed, it didn't appear to have had time to have deviated in any great amount or had to have been able to stop for any substantial length of time. I tried to estimate how long it takes to drive from Old Faithful down to the turnaround spot south of Lewis Lake and then reverse course and exit out the west entrance of Yellowstone National Park. I estimated the drive time to be about 2 hours and 50 minutes. The device covered that distance in about 2 hours and 13 minutes. So faster than would probably be a typical driving time. Of course, there's a lot of variables traveling within Yellowstone National Park because of traffic and animal activity and so forth. But based on my review, I really came to the conclusion that I could find really no place where there seemed to be any deviation from a populated area or any substantial period of time that it may have stopped other than the very public area at Old Faithful.
And did you continue to look at the travel of that device for September 8th?
Yes, I did.
And what are we seeing on this particular slide?
So these are the locations that the device went to after it left Yellowstone. And it stopped first in West Yellowstone, Montana, at a commercial area. There's several businesses in that area, but the nearest business seems to be this Buckaroo Bill's Barbecue Grill. And it stopped there at 1852 and was there about a 17-minute period until 1902. From the time it had left the Yellowstone parking lot at 1627 until it got to Buckaroo Bill's Barbecue, as best I could tell from my review, the vehicle hadn't stopped, or at least not for more than a few minutes. And so, again, here it's in a very public area before it starts moving again. It then moves at driving speed back to Rexburg, Idaho, and its next stop is at 2037 at 565 Pioneer Road, number 175 in Rexburg at the Rock Creek Townhomes.
I'm pausing there briefly. Were you able to determine definitively if the device went to that particular restaurant?
I'm not aware that was a common thing we tried to do, was to see if we could obtain records or video from any of these locations that it would visit. I'm not aware we obtained anything from Buckaroo Bill's Barbecue or even that it had gone there.
But there was a stop around that area for approximately 17 minutes?
Yes, correct.
And outside of that stop, any indication that vehicle stopped again on the drive to Rexburg?
No.
And then after arriving back at that Pioneer Road 175, where did the device go to next?
The device stayed at number 175 until 2135. It then left there and traveled to this Maverick, which is about a mile north of the 565 Pioneer Road address. It was there for about 10 minutes from 2143 to 2153 before returning to 565 Pioneer Road number 175, where it stayed from 2244 to 2315. At approximately 2344, we now see the device at 565 Pioneer Road number 107. Sometimes there's gaps in the data, for example, between when it's at 175 and 107, nearly 30 minutes, 29-minute gap. And that was fairly common, where we just don't have precise data to say it's in one location or another. It doesn't mean I didn't necessarily have location information. It wasn't precise enough to say what unit it was in. So I generally just summarized when I felt like there was enough information to indicate that it is now in a different location.
And with regard to this, did you make any determination as far as Tylee Ryan's whereabouts?
So we were trying to prepare a timeline of her activities, and that was coming in from many different sources in the investigation. Some of her financial activities, her use of digital media, anyone that might have seen her or been in communication with her, and so forth. So we were trying to narrow that down as best we could. That photograph in Yellowstone National Park was very important for us because it was the last known location for her. After I completed this review on that particular day, it was my conclusion that it really had only made one stop from the time that photo appeared to have been taken, and that was in West Yellowstone, Montana, in a public area. So my best conclusion as of the last known location for Tylee Ryan was at 565 Pioneer Road number 175, and that would have been at 2037 that evening.
And then on this same slide, there's some indication of data points on Monday, September 9th. Can you tell us what we're seeing there?
Yes. The device I was reviewing for Alex Cox, in the month of September, beginning on September 5th, it would typically go to 107 at night. When I say at night, I mean roughly from about midnight to 6 a.m. It was almost always during those hours within 107 when I had sufficient data to indicate that. On this particular night, and this was the only time I observed that, at least in the month of September, we received some data points of the device in 175 in the early hours of that morning, and we just had 3 data points during that time. Now it was really common that when the device was moving, I observed regular updates of its location, sometimes one or more a minute, or at least every few minutes. That was pretty typical to get an update. It seemed like when the device stopped somewhere, the updates became less frequent, particularly at night. Sometimes it would be an hour or more between a data point. And so during that time, there are just 3 precise data points, and they are at 2:42, and then a second one at 2:42, and then another one at 3:37. All 3 of these were GPS data points with a 4-meter radius, and they seem to put the device in unit 175.
And again, this was the only time in September that you noticed that device in 175 in those early morning hours?
Yes, except for on September 30th, there was one occasion where it stayed the night in 175 on the night of September 30th.
And then what are we seeing with those next data points?
So the next data points with sufficient precision to tell me what unit it appeared to be in came in beginning at 4:37, and then another one at 4:39, and then 4:41, 5:14, 6:47, and 8:49. These data points put the device back at 107. Now, these were a combination of Wi-Fi and GPS data points. And the margin of error, or the radius on those data points, varied, and the span of the variation was 8 to 37 meters, depending on the point.
And can you tell us what we're seeing in this slide?
So this is an image of the Rock Creek townhomes for the time period that I just discussed, and it is taken from that exact mapping software that I was using at the time in 2020, as provided to me by Nick Balance. So at that particular time, the image for this property was somewhat dated. It was dated from 2015, and part of the complex had not been built yet. But in the upper left corner, where this yellow pin is, was unit 175 for Lori Vallow. And on the right, where the other yellow pin is, was unit 107, where Alex Cox was residing. And the other red points on here are the data points that I discussed that we saw in those early morning hours. So it looks like just one data point there, but that's actually all 3 of those data points are really on top of each other. One from 242, another one from 242, and one from 337. And all of those were fairly precise GPS data points with a 4-meter margin of error. Now, the distance between these 2 units is about 80 meters. So Lori Vallow's unit actually faced Alex Cox's unit's front door, and vice versa. His front door was here and faced her front door. And the way to travel between these, there was an opening between the buildings here. And the person could then walk front door to front door, and probably have moved back and forth between the units in within a few minutes. But I would look for data points that were well under the 80-meter distance between the 2 locations to try to draw some conclusions about what location the device appeared to be in. And then the other data points for unit 107 are marked here on the right, that shows those data points between 437 and 439. And as you can see, some of them aren't necessarily in the unit. They're outside of the unit, but that's within that margin of error. I can't say whether at that particular moment he's right inside that unit or if he's standing outside the unit, only that he's most closely associated with that unit.
And this is in the early morning hours of September 9th?
Yes, the last data point was at 8:49. And I believe that's this one here within Alex Cox's apartment.
And again, the last known sighting of Tylee Ryan was the day before?
Yes, at 2037 was my conclusion that she probably had arrived back home at that time.
Did you continue to look at location data associated with that device for Monday, September 9th?
I did.
And can you talk to us about what we're seeing depicted on this slide?
So this is a continuation of the summary of what was happening on Monday, September 9th in the morning. So we had just looked at those data points in the early morning hours, and the final ones were in Unit 107. So beginning at almost approximately at 9 o'clock, it seems to leave 565 Pioneer Road, number 107, and moves at driving speed north to US. It gets on US 20, and it continues towards an address of 202 North, 1900 East in Rexburg, Idaho. That address is a little under 8 miles north of the 565 Pioneer Road address. It arrives there approximately at 9:15. Now, there's a series of data points showing it's that movement, kind of like breadcrumbs. And I believe the final data point at 9:15 is just maybe 100 yards south of the address. So it appears to be arriving at approximately that time.
And did you determine who that address is associated with?
Yes, the 202 North, 1900 East in Rexburg was the residence of Chad Daybell at that time.
Did you ever learn of any connection between Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox?
No, I had no information that they knew each other.
So their only connection would be Chad Daybell?
Yes, as far as I know.
And once that device arrives by the residence of Chad Daybell, what did you determine next in relation to the location data?
Between about approximately a 2.5-hour period, there were numerous data points generally around the Daybell residence. There were only 4 of fairly great precision. One was at 9:21, one was at 9:22, one was at 10:39, and one was at 10:57. Now, there were other data points, cell tower data, for example, that did not seem to indicate that it had left that area, but weren't precise enough to give me any indication of if it was there continuously during that period, that 2.5-hour period. Only that we had some precise data that seemed to show that it was on the Daybell property at those 4 times. Now, the first data point that we got at 9:21 is actually behind the main residence at the Daybell property, back on the rear of the property. And that is a GPS coordinate with a 6-meter radius. And then at 9:22, we get another one that's actually on the northwest corner of the Daybell residence, near a gate there. And that is also a GPS data point with a 3-meter radius. And then we have a gap in time where we don't have any precise information, but until 10:39, when there's another data point, also a GPS data point that's behind the residence, and this has a 43-meter radius. And then at 10:57, there's another also behind the residence with a 5-meter radius, also GPS. As best I could determine, it seems like the device is leaving that area of the residence at approximately 11:45. I actually see briefly it seems to drive north from the residence, the opposite direction of Rexburg, for just a minute or two. Maybe goes about a block north, shortly before 11:45, and then it seems to turn around and then begin traveling south. So it may have left the Daybell residence just a few minutes before 11:45. But by 11:45, it is driving southbound back into Rexburg, and its next stop is at 11:52 in northern part of Rexburg at Del Taco at 568 North 2nd East, where it stays for about 10 minutes.
And again, I think you previously had talked about when a device would stay still, sometimes you wouldn't get data points.
Yes, they tended to slow down in the frequency of the data points in my observation.
And if they were traveling, oftentimes you observe more data points.
Yes, and I could only speculate why that is, but it seemed like that's what I observed.
And then can you tell us what we're seeing in this slide?
So this is an image from the file I was reviewing with an overhead image of the Daybell property at 202 North, 1900 East. The road here on the left is 1900 East, and this is 200 North. 1900 East is also called Salem Road. This building here on the property is the main residence for where people resided. These other buildings were outbuildings. This was a barn or an attached garage-like structure, and there were some other outbuildings like sheds. The first data point we got of some precision was at 9:21, and that was in this area. And then the next one was just a minute later at 9:22, and that was up here. Now, this was a fairly precise data point, a 3-meter radius. And on that northwest corner of the property, there's actually a gate that a vehicle could travel through, and it would allow someone to have access to the property through that gate in a vehicle if necessary. The next two data points are then back down here, one at 10:39 and another one at 10:57. The one at 10:39 had a 49-meter radius, and then the one at 10:57 had a 5-meter radius.
At some point during the investigation, did that cluster of data points gain more significance?
Yes, we had observed those data points in my review. I think Nick Balance had also drawn attention to them earlier in the investigation. But there was a period of time we just didn't know what the full significance of those data points could mean. But I had finished my review of all these data points by May 21st of 2020. But on June 1st of 2020, we received some additional information that seemed to show these data points had possibly greater significance.
And what was that information?
There was a device that had been seized during the execution of a search warrant at the Daybell residence on January 3rd, 2020. In the course of this investigation, numerous devices had been recovered from various locations in various ways. These devices were quite often sent to a computer forensics laboratory to extract data from the devices. And then the process typically is that information goes into a system so it can be reviewed by an investigator or analyst. There was one particular device that was recovered on January 3rd from the Daybell residence. Its relevance to the investigation was unknown, or who would use that device. It went to the RCFL and ultimately went to an analyst in Boise named Ben Dean, and he was reviewing that particular device.
Did you ultimately review some of the content obtained from that device?
Yes, I did.
And did you review it as initially pulled from the device and provided to you?
Yes.
Was this one of those messages?
Yes. So analyst Ben Dean contacted me on June 1st of 2020 and indicated that he had found a text message on the device, and also based on the review he was conducting, that it appeared to be a device that Tammy Daybell had used before her death.
And could you read this message into the record?
Yes. This message appeared on the device on September 9th at 11:53 a.m. And it was a text message from a device attributed to Chad Daybell, and it came into that device for Tammy Daybell. And the text message read, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times."
And in this, do you see the reference to a fire pit?
Yes, I do.
Did you determine if there was a fire pit on the Daybell property?
Yes, I did.
And looking back at that previous slide, and again, these data points are from September 9th of 2019.
Yes.
Did you learn anything in relation to that cluster of red dots?
Yes. So subsequently, I had been to that location on January 3rd of 2020 for the first time. I'd been on the property and had walked much of the outer property as well, but it was under snow at the time. And then subsequently, a search was conducted on June 9th at that location, and I was also present. And I'm aware there is a fire pit on the property. And although I don't have it marked on here, it's approximately in this area.
So around the same area as those data points?
Yes, in the vicinity, yes.
Do you know what was ultimately found near those data points?
So at a nearby location to the fire pit, investigators approximately in this area, were able to recover human remains that had been buried.
Do you know who those human remains were ultimately determined to be?
Yes, they were Tylee Ryan.
And from there, that device left and went to Del Taco?
Yes, the device I was reviewing for Alex Cox had left at approximately 11:45 a.m. on September 9th, left the Daybell property, and traveled at driving speed back to Rexburg, where it stopped at the Del Taco at about 11:52. So approximately the time this text was sent.
As part of your investigation, did you focus on other dates in September?
Yes, I did.
What were those dates?
So we had also looked at dates associated with J.J. Vallow, that we believe that J.J. Vallow we knew he was in school after September 9th. We also had other information that he had been observed up until at least September 22nd. His first date of being absent from school was September 23rd. Fairly early in the investigation, there was actually some confusion whether he had attended school on the 23rd or not. We initially thought he had been in school the 23rd, and then asked for further clarification from the school on the attendance records and determined that was actually his first day of absence from school. So his last known time in school was September 20th.
And can you tell us what we're seeing on this slide?
Yes, this is a summary of my review of the device for Alex Cox and its activities on the evening of Sunday, September 22nd, 2019, into Monday, September 23rd, 2019.
And what did you determine in relation to the device associated with Alex for Sunday, September 22nd?
Yes, from 1626 in the afternoon and really until 9:41 a.m. the following day of the 23rd, the device is at 565 Pioneer Road, though it travels back and forth between the two associated units within the complex multiple times. So as from 1626 to 1708, it appears to be in 175. I should note that all of these locations, we had data points that were either GPS or Wi-Fi, and the range of the margin of error was 4 to 17 meters. So it leaves 175, and by 1709, it seems to be in 107 from 1709 to 1711. Then from 1712 to 1845, it appears to be back in 175. From 1046 to 2003, it appears to be in 107 again. And then from 2004 to 2009, it is back in 175. At 2011, it goes back to 107 and appears to stay there for the night. Although here it shows it ending at 2356 on September 22nd. That was just helped me to really break the last data point on September 22nd. And the next data point we get is at 0011 on the 23rd, and it's still in 107. And the range of the times that appears to be in 107 stays there, that it stays there from until 0941.
And again, you had indicated that those units were within a short walking distance.
Yes, approximately 80 meters between the units. Approximately 80 minutes between the units. 80 meters. Sorry, I apologize.
80 meters between the units. Is that correct?
Yes.
And a 1 to 2 minute walk.
Yes, that's what I would estimate.
Did you continue to look at the location data for Monday, September 23rd?
I did.
And can you tell us what we're seeing in this slide?
Yes, on the morning of September 23rd, 2019, that device leaves Unit 107 at approximately 9:41 a.m. It travels north. It's on US Highway 20 and travels to the residence of Chad Daybell, 202 North, 1900 East, where it arrives at approximately 9:55. And then between 9:55 and 10:12, approximately 17 minutes, the device is in the vicinity of the Daybell residence. We get 6 data points during that period of time in or around the Daybell property. The first one is at 9:55. It's at the front of the property near the garage, and this is a Wi-Fi data point with a 50-meter radius. And then at 9:56, there is another data point on the rear northern part of the property, and it is by what appears to be a pond on the property. And I use that term pond, but it's it could be a pond or a pit. The 2 occasions I was on the property, it didn't have any water in it. There's that data point there, and it's a GPS data point with a 4-meter radius. And then at 10:02, there's also another GPS data point by the pond on the property. By 10:05, the next data point I receive is near the front door of the house, and it's a Wi-Fi data point with a 68-meter radius. There's another one at 10:07, also near the front of the house. That's a Wi-Fi data point with a 92-meter radius. And then by 10:12, that data point is actually in the middle of the road, a Salem Road and 200 North. And from there, there's a series of data points, and that one is a Wi-Fi data point with a 28-meter radius. And after that, there's a series of data points seeming to show the device leaving at driving speed, and it returns to 565 Pioneer Road and goes to Unit 175 and arrives there at 10:22 and stays there until 11:14. So just to summarize, from the time it left Alex's residence at 9:41, it took 41 minutes for it to return again to the same 565 Pioneer Road complex, but then go to Lori Vallow's unit. And there's approximately a 10 to 14 minute drive either way.
To be clear, this device leaves from the residence associated with Alex Cox and goes to Chad Daybell's residence. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the device goes from Chad Daybell's residence to Lori Vallow's residence. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is the day after the last known sighting of JJ Vallow?
Yes.
Can you tell us what we're seeing in this slide?
So this is an image from the mapping software that I was reviewing of the Daybell property, with the road on the left being 1900 East or Salem Road, and the road along the south being 200 North. Again, this is the main residence for the Daybells, and these were outbuildings on the property. There was a pond-like terrain feature on the property, and next to that terrain feature was a tree. The first data point, the data points I mentioned earlier are here on the left, and the first one was again at 9:55 near the garage. That was here, and that's again a Wi-Fi data point with a 50-meter radius. Approximately 1 minute later at 9:56, the data point is here by the pond, and that's a GPS data point with a 4-meter radius. And then at 10:02, there's another data point near the last one. It's a GPS data point with a 3-meter radius. By 10:05, we get data points just here in front of the house. One is near the front door. It's a Wi-Fi data point with a 38-meter radius. And then at 10:07, one next to it, also near the front of the house, a Wi-Fi data point with a 92-meter radius. And the final data point is right here at 10:12. And that is a Wi-Fi data point with a 28-meter radius. And again, from that point, the device, we get a series of data points showing it traveling back to 565 Pioneer Road.
And looking at the data points by the pond or pit area, at some point in the investigation, did those data points gain more significance?
Yes, they did.
And why was that?
In light of that text message from Chad to Tammy on September 9th, and coupling with that with the location information showing that Alex was also on the property that same morning when something was being burned and buried, it made us scrutinize these particular data points even more, since they corresponded with the approximate time when JJ was last known to be alive. And so it seemed to indicate that Alex may have been on this property in these locations about the time the children were last known to be alive.
Was a search conducted around that area?
Yes. So that search had been conducted on June 9th of 2019. The Rexburg Police Department had obtained a search warrant for the property. I was present for that search. The FBI's evidence response team handled the crime scene investigation at the site, and a search was conducted of that property.
Do you know what was located in that vicinity?
Yes, near these data points here by the pond, really just almost next to or under that tree was a grave for JJ Vallow.
Did you look at how many times that device associated with Alex Cox was in the vicinity of the Daybell residence for the month of September?
Yes, I did. As part of going through the day-by-day activities of that device, I observed it seemed to be at or in the vicinity of the Daybell residence in the month of September 4 times. These were Friday, September 6th. It was there from 12:42 to 12:53. These data points seem to be near the front or possibly in the residence, but just near the front of the residence. I didn't observe anything on the back property. On September 9th, again, as I previously discussed, we had a series of data points, including some on the back property. And then on September 3rd, we had a series of data points from 9:55 to 10:12, some of which were also on the back property. And then on September 25th, this device for Alex was at the Daybell residence from about 10:05 to 10:22. And these did not seem to be on the back property. They were also near the front of the residence.
And out of those, the 2 dates of significance, would it be fair to say they were September 9th and September 23rd?
Yes.
And again, through your investigation, who did you determine Alex Cox knew that resided at the Daybell residence?
The only person I'm aware that he knew was Chad Daybell.
Did you also look at some data points associated with window tinting?
Yes. Some of the activities that this device, places that it seemed to have gone was a particular window tinting place in Rexburg. And I saw it visit the window tinting place 3 times, although briefly each time. The first time was on September 23rd, 2019. And so this is the afternoon after the device had been at the Daybell residence. And this was from 1353 to 1958. It went to this Dan's window tinting at 2551 West, 6800 South in Rexburg.
And I think you may have said 1958. Was it 1358?
Yes, I'm sorry. It was from 1353 to 1358.
So just a 5-minute stop.
Yes.
Thank you. And then proceed.
And then on September 25th, 2019, from 9:02 to 9:03, it returned to that same Dan's window tinting. And then later that day, it was there again from 11:57 to 11:59.
And could those short stops be consistent with someone dropping a vehicle off to get window tinting put on?
It could be, yes.
And you'd previously talked about being aware of an attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Do you know when that attempted shooting occurred?
Yes, it happened on the morning of October 2nd, 2019.
What are we seeing in this slide?
So the images on the right of the vehicle is a Jeep that belonged to Tylee Ryan. This vehicle was a search of the vehicle was conducted by the Rexburg Police Department, I believe, about December 18th of 2019, and the FBI's evidence response team in Salt Lake assisted with processing this vehicle. And I was not present during this search. And at a later time, as I reviewed photographs taken during the search, I noted there were some receipts taken by the evidence response team of 2 receipts that they had located within the vehicle. And I further scrutinized those two receipts and obtained some information off of them.
And was there information on those receipts that caught your attention?
Yes, both of the receipts possibly had some significance. The first receipt on the right there was a receipt from October 1st, 2019 at 1312. And it was from a restaurant in Mesa, Arizona called Los Favoritos. And it was for for food and a beverage. And it was a cash transaction in the amount of $886. The second receipt was from October 18th, 2019 at 8:05 p.m. And it's from Chick-fil-A in Ammon, Idaho, also for food and a beverage. And it was a cash transaction in the amount of $8.15.
And when we look at this Jeep, can you tell if the windows appear to be tinted?
Yes, they do.
And when we talked about the device going to the window tint shop for the first time, do you recall the date that device first showed up at the tinting shop?
Yes, September 23rd, 2019.
And was that after that device had been up in the vicinity of Chad Daybell's property?
Yes.
Do you know where the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux took place?
Yes, it took place at the residence where Brandon Boudreaux was residing in Gilbert, Arizona, in front of his house.
And again, the date of that attempted shooting?
October 2nd, 2019, in the morning, roughly 9 a.m., I believe.
And with regard to that second receipt, was there something significant about October 18th of 2019?
Yes. On the night of October 18th, 2019 into October 19th, 2019, Tammy Daybell died at her residence.
As part of your investigation, did you also look into some devices that were purchased?
Yes, I did. So in the course of this investigation, we found additional devices that were associated with Alex Cox and others in this investigation. Two particular devices were possibly associated with Alex Cox, and I did some follow-up investigation to obtain more information on those two devices.
And what did you learn in relation to those two devices?
Yes, the first device was a track phone, and we found that it was associated with the same Homer J. Maximus as the Verizon phone that I was reviewing. So a person can associate multiple phones with their Google account. And so there was another phone number associated with that Google account. We obtained additional information from TrackPhone regarding that device. And although we did not recover that device, we found that it was a prepaid cellular phone purchased from a Walmart in Idaho Falls on September 25th, 2019, and it was purchased at 1910. The phone number for that particular device was 304-960-5958. I was notified about this device and a second device by I don't recall if it was Nick Balance or analyst Nikki Heidemann who was reviewing these records. But this second device was a device that was actually recovered from Lori Vallow's, that had been in Lori Vallow's residence at Unit 175. And the Rexburg Police Department had obtained that device from the property management company who had disposed of items within her apartment after it had been vacated. So in approximately January of 2020, they were disposing of property in that location.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. I've allowed a bit of a narrative, but this is becoming into levels of hearsay and speculation. And
I'll sustain that on a narrative objection.
Through the investigation, did you learn that a cell phone had been recovered from Lori Vallow's apartment?
Yes.
And did you ultimately discuss that with other investigators?
Yes.
And did you discuss the information they had regarding that cell phone?
Yes.
And what did you learn from them?
That the device was given to them by the property management company.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Respond.
It's not coming in for the truth of the matter. It's coming in for why this investigator did what he did next within the investigation.
On that point, I am going to overrule the objection, so you can continue.
What did you learn from the other investigators regarding that device?
Just that they had located a device.
Judge, I'm going to object. That is hearsay.
That's sustained.
Based on what you learned from the other investigators, what, if anything, did you do in relation to that device?
I was given track phone records that we obtained that showed that the device had been purchased from a Walmart in Rexburg, Idaho. And I went there for both of these two devices and recovered receipts for those, the purchase of those records. The purchase of those phones.
Did you do that based on the information you obtained from other law enforcement officers?
Yes, they gave me the track phone records.
And that was a track phone that other investigators had recovered?
One of these two phones had been recovered by other investigators. The other one was just associated with a Google account.
And the one recovered by the investigators was deemed to have significance or potential significance to this investigation?
Judge, argumentative. So objection.
Overruled.
Could you ask the question again, please?
Was the device recovered determined by other investigators to potentially have significance to this investigation?
Yes.
And was it based on that information that you then took your next actions?
Yes.
And what information did they provide you in relation to that phone?
The records we got from TrackPhone was just indicated that it was a prepaid phone from TrackPhone, and where it was purchased and when.
And you indicated that you recovered the receipts associated with both of these devices?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States Exhibit 227A and 227B. And there's a copy for counsel, the court, and a courtesy copy for your honor.
Thank you.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.